a scene from my novel Maiden. It's based on the retelling of the Hamlet's Maiden myth, and it's set in a coastal North Carolina city. This is a scene where my character has just found out that her parents are going to sell a piano. Jane sat at a piano that took up one of the bay windows facing the sidewalk. She laid her forehead on the keyboard cover. "I'm sorry," she whispered, stroked the faded wood. Made of rosewood, the piano had an elaborately carved music rack with thick curved pedestal legs. The ivory keys had yellowed over the years, and the required tuning had not taken place on a regular schedule. The instrument was one of the few bona fide antiques in the store, but it only occupied this corner, Jane told herself many times, because they couldn't get it up the stairs. It was never meant for sale because it was hers. She was 4 when she learned to play on a visit to her great aunt Jessie May's house in Chicago, an ancient stone place that didn't scare her because it had a goldfish pond in the sidewalk. Jane had stuck her thumb in her mouth and climbed the stairs toward the house with its high ceilings and cool, silent rooms. Her eyes fell on the grand piano, and she scooted underneath, out of sight. As her parents engaged in a minor skirmish over something or other, the wrinkled woman who smelled of peppermint candy and baby powder patted the piano bench. "Climb on up here, you," she said, struggling to pull Jane to her lap. Jessie May slid her fingers on the keyboard, and Jane removed her thumb from her mouth. She tilted her head as the old woman played a simple Mozart melody. By the 3rd time through, Jane pushed the big hands away and played the piece on her own. She continued note for note, again and again, until the woman wrapped her in her soft arms and kissed Jane on the head. "Let's go see what's in the kitchen," she had said. "I'll bet there's a biscuit in there with your name on it." When it was time to leave, Jane was allowed to pick all the monkey-faced pansies she wanted from the garden and place them in a marmalade jar filled with water. By the time the Millers returned to Itch after driving straight through the night and most of the day, the jar had tipped over in the back seat. Jane got a spanking that left bruises on her fanny, even though her flowers were dead. But she had tapped out the song that was her very own with her fingertips on the seat all the way home, smiling out the window at the moon as they zoomed through the dark mountains. The following year, the great aunt had died. The piano appeared one day at the Millers in a credit addressed to Little Miss Jane Miller. When her mother signed for the delivery, the driver handed her a long envelope of heavy cream paper from a Chicago lawyer that included instructions regarding a Russian piano teacher who had been hired, and the money to be paid every month for lessons from an account administered by the bank. Now, Jane straightened a lace scarf draped across the lid of the old piano, which held a collection of velvet plush hats in various colors. She tossed her braids over her shoulders, selected a fuchsia hat, pulled it over her ears. With her hands over the keys, wrists extended, her fingers curved so that just the tips pressed into the worn ivory. The piano responded, exhaled, filled the building with the meat and potatoes of the daily warm-up of two-handed major and minor scales. Descended in a series of arpeggios, sparkling cascades of notes traveling the length of the keyboard. Then Jane settled into a Chopin sonata. The music seeped through the walls, slipped through every crack around the drafty windows, the broken hinge on the back door, missing mortar in the brickwork. The melodies unfurled into the world outside, slender, translucent curls that grew into an inescapable tidal wave of sound. A policeman on his way into the courthouse stopped at the threshold. A hairdresser smartly reached to unlock her beauty shop, but her hand froze mid-turn. She lost her balance and gasped, falling in love again with the brown-eyed boy with the chipped tooth. The music spread for miles on all points of the compass, even reaching a schooner far off the coast. A man seated at a breakfast table on the deck turned his head toward the sound. The childhood memory of his mama calling him to dinner, overwhelming him, followed by the long, excited run through the plaza, the smell of snook and garlic fresh from the skillet. Then the music ended as abruptly as it began. The policeman and beautician paused, righted themselves, and resumed the never-ending responsibility and tedium of their adult lives. But the man on the ship called, "Stop!" and the confused crew dropped their ropes and chains and armfuls of heavy canvas where they stood. "We're changing course," he said to the captain, and pointed his finger to the west.